Bring this meeting to order.
Make a motion to remove 7D. It's about a dam. We got more information. And then add is 14B.
Roll call.
Give us 1 second, we're gonna get Mr. Farmer on the
14B.
phone.
Need to add discussion. Performance. Read that PCSA Board of Supervisors appointee, okay?
Faden, which number did we call earlier
Which one?
for Mr. Farmer?
Hello?
Mr. Farmer?
Yes.
Hey, this is Kaylin. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to get you on the phone.
If you can't hear him, let me know and I'll walk.
Okay.
She's gonna let me know if she can't hear it, I'll lower.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we ready for roll call?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Barber,
Here.
Mr. Blackstock,
Present.
Mr. Farmer,
Here.
Mr. Scarce,
Here.
Mr. Warren. Here. Dr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Davis.
Present.
Mr. Davis, can I ask Mr. Farmer some questions? Mr. Farmer's going to remotely participate in this meeting. Our bylaws and the Virginia State Code allow it. He's limited to 2 meetings per year, and the state code and our bylaws require 2 things. He must identify the people present, the reason for his absence. Mr. Farmer, why are you absent today?
On vacation.
Okay, and he also must identify the physical location he's calling from into the meeting. So, Mr. Farmer, can you please state the address you're calling from?
328 Sandpiper Court, Nags Head, North Carolina.
Okay, that satisfies the state code and our board policy on remote meetings. Mr. Farmer can now participate in all aspects of this meeting.
Thank you. All those who will, join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Those of you who can stand, please join me in pledging allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any items to be added to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have us remove item 7D, and I also would like to add items 14B, discussion of performance of PCA Board of Supervisors appointee.
Okay, I have a motion.
And let me explain what's going on with 7D. Apologize for not telling you in advance. We received some new information from the federal government about the dam rehabilitation funding agreement today. Mr. Hicks and I received it, and it changed the decision-making process. So that's not right for action today. We will bring you back that information at the next meeting with an appropriate course of action. That's why we're removing 7D.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Scarce, a second by Mr. Warren. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Please cast your vote. All right, Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. I will now close the vote.
The vote passes unanimously. Moving on to item 6, approval of the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the agenda with the amendments as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Blackstock, thank you, and seconded by Mr. Barber. Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none.
Please cast your vote. And Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. I will now close the vote.
Motion passes unanimously, thank you. Rezoning of public, we're not here?
Consent agenda.
Consent agenda, okay. Pardon me? Pardon me. Okay. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented in the board packet.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Blackstock, thank you. Any further comments or discussion? Hearing none.
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. I will now close the vote.
Motion passes unanimously, thank you. Moving on to item 7A, minutes, June 18, 2019.
No, we just approved the consent agenda. You need to go to Section 8, presentations.
We'll get to it. You said, Counselor, we're on the presentations. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, 8A, Mr. Schlemp and Mr. Smithman are going to have a presentation about Executive Fire Officer Program.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Chairman Davis and Board of Supervisors members, I am excited to present an award or a recognition to one of our top-performing staff members, Mr. Chris Slimp. He has recently completed the Executive Fire Officer Program. This is a multi-year, multidisciplinary executive program that is a top-tier achievement for those in the fire service. I've been lucky to know and work with several fire professionals that have achieved this designation. It is a very difficult process. I know, I would suspect that Mr. Slimp rewrote his final dissertation several times. It is a very rigorous, multi-year endeavor. By chance, Mr. Michael Lee, our Deputy Director of Public Safety, has also achieved this designation as Executive Fire Officer. And at this time, I would like for Mr. Slimp and his fiancee Heidi to come down front. I would like to present him, which I don't believe he's seen before, his certificate of completion of the National Fire Academy Executive Fire Officer Program. And I'd also like for the executive team to join me down front and ask if Matt would take a picture of us with Mr. Slimp and Michael too, please.
He didn't invite us.
So it says, please come, yes. It says, United States Fire Administration, National Fire Academy, in recognition of successful completion of the requisite courses of study and applied research projects, the National Fire Academy, under the authority granted by the 116th Congress of the United States of America, and on recommendation of the faculty, confers the title of Executive Fire Officer upon Christopher C. Slimp with all privileges and responsibilities thereunto appertaining, awarded this 20th day of March, 2019. Congratulations. I'll get a little bit closer. You might ask this one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Congratulations, I know you were a real reason you got it.
I will say, when I interviewed for the job, one of the questions I asked Mr. Smith was, I wanted to complete it because I started in those districts and won't finish it. And he said, absolutely, I'm familiar with the program, so that right there is all I needed. So it was a big thing for me, I won't finish it. So I know she's happy to come over soon.
Thank you, Chris. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Mr. Slimp. Appreciate the good job you're doing. Our next item is hearing of the citizens. Is that correct? Yes. I want to make sure we're on the same page. Each person addressing the board under hearing of the citizens shall be a resident or a landowner of the county or the registered agent of such resident or landowner. Each person shall step up, give his or her name and district in an audible tone of voice for the record, and unless further time is granted by the chairman, shall limit his or her address to 3 minutes. No person shall be permitted to address the board more than once during hearing of the citizens. All remarks shall be addressed to the board as a body and not to any individual member thereof. Hearing of the citizens shall last for a maximum of 45 minutes. Any individual that is signed up to speak during said section who does not get the opportunity to do so because of the aforementioned time limit shall be given speaking priority at the next board meeting. Absent chairman's approval, no person shall be able to speak who is not signed up. Ms. McCluster.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The first citizen we have signed up to speak would be Mr. Coy Harville.
Good evening. I'm Coy Harville from the Westover District. Just like to express my feelings here on one of the items on the agenda. On Thursday, July the 11th, Supervisor Warren called me and wanted to meet with me at Westside Diner at 4:30 p.m. for coffee. I agreed and met with him, and Supervisor Skess was with him, which surprised me since I went to meet Supervisor Warren. When I expressed my surprise that Supervisor Skess was there, he said he would leave, but I told him, he didn't have to leave. The meeting turned out to be about something that happened over 7 months ago that I am sorry happened, and I publicly apologize for any offense I might have caused. Supervisor Warren told me he was giving me the option to resign by Monday because I had a good reputation and he didn't want to smear my name. But I did not resign. He had 4 votes to remove me from the authority. This had been done prior to meeting with me and without any input from me. I have been on the Service Authority for 36 years, which is an appointment position by the Board of Supervisors, which I have done because I love Pittsylvania County and the citizens of this county. The Service Authority has accomplished many good things for the citizens while I have been on the board, and there are many good things in the works I would like to continue working on until they are completed. The thing that I did, I am sorry for is I made a statement to a businessman that maybe I should write a letter to the editor about the incident and maybe we should do business with someone else. That was just a statement and no action was taken. Here we are 7 months later and no letter to the editor, and we are still doing business with the business in question. Why should you remove a person for the Service Authority after 36 years on one incident that has not caused harm to anyone, for which I apologize for? The Service Board has elected me chairman recently on a unanimous vote, and we all work well together for the good of the county. I ask that you accept my apology and allow me to continue working with you, the Service Authority Board, and the citizens of Pittsylvania County. In closing, the Executive Director and 5 other board members have asked me not to resign for the good of the ongoing projects in Pittsylvania County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harville. It's a pleasure of the board.
We have one more citizen signed
we
up to
do?
speak, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
That's Mr. Scotty Adams.
last one?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chairman, board members, I'd like to speak. Scotty Adams, Callens, Gretna District, Vice President of Pennsylvania County Fire and Rescue Association. I would like to speak tonight regarding the email that President Fowler from the Fire and Rescue Association sent to Mr. Slim, correction to Mr. Smitherman about our money that was not used by the agencies that did not meet their 70%. Board members, the ones that met their 70% needs that money. We need it for the ones that had fuel that went in the red, electric that went in the red, and also heating fuel. I know y'all made some decisions at the Finance Committee meeting today, but I would like y'all consider not doing that, because the decision y'all made in the Finance meeting today will go to the ones also that didn't meet the 70%. That would be cutting the throats of the ones that met the 70%. Please consider following the recommendation of the Fire and Rescue Association. Each one of you got the email as the county administrator did. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we moving on to number 10, Counselor?
Yes,
Are we
sir.
gonna-
If nobody else has signed up, Ms. McCluster, yes.
So what's the pleasure of the board?
No.
No vote. Okay, so what we're moving on to now is rezoning cases, am I correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank God for that. Pursuant to Article 5, Division 6 of the Pennsylvania County Zoning Ordinance, the Board of Supervisors has been empowered to hear and decide specific zoning issues and zoning map changes in support of said ordinance. In accomplishing this important task, the board is responsible for promoting the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Pennsylvania County. The board must ensure that all of its decisions and regulations be directed to these goals and that each be consistent with the environment, the comprehensive plan, and the best interests of Pennsylvania County, its citizens, and its posterity. Mr. Sides.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you may open the public hearing for case 1.
I open this public hearing up at 7:17. Mr. Sides.
Case R-19-020, Ray and Elta Joe Taylor have petitioned to rezone .361 of an acre located on State Road 899, Cardwell Lane in the Dan River Election District from R1 Residential Suburban Subdivision District to A1 Agricultural District to combine with the adjacent 33 acres already zoned A1. Planning Commission voted by a 7-0 vote with no opposition that the petitioner's request be granted. Once the property is rezoned and all uses listed under section 35-178 are permitted. Staff summary is enclosed in your packet, and Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ray Taylor is here to represent the petition.
All right. All right, Mr.
Evening. I'd just like to be able to get this over with, so the man that bought the land behind me will be happy, and we'll both be happy.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, we have no one else signed up for this case.
All right.
So you
Clo-
can close the public hearing.
I close this public hearing at 7:19. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we the rezoning for case number R-19-020, Ray L. Taylor and Ethel Joe Taylor in the Dan River District be rezoned to A1 Agricultural District.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Motion made by Mr. Warren. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Barber. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Let me get the motion in a second on the screen. All right, please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Passes unanimous, Mr. Taylor. Your property's been rezoned. Those of you who would like to stay, we'd appreciate it. We'd like for you to take an active part. And those of you that would not like to stay, you're at liberty to leave. So we try to get that statement out to those who don't want to stick around. So thank you, Mr. Taylor. Moving on to case number 2.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you may open the public hearing for case 2.
I open this public hearing up at 7:20.
Case 2, case R-19-0221. Thomas and Janet Brown have petitioned to rezone 20.73 acres located on State Road 662, Randolph Drive, and on State Road 729, Mount Table Road, in the Dan River Election District from R1 Residential Suburban Subdivision District to A1 Agricultural District to make the zoning consistent with their adjacent 91-acre farm. The Planning Commission recommended by a 7-0 vote with no opposition that the petitioner's request be granted. Once the property is rezoned to A1, then all uses listed under section 35-178 are permitted uses. Stand summaries enclosed in your packet, and Mr. Chairman, Mr. Thomas Brown is here to represent the petition. Mr. Brown?
Mr. Brown? Is there anything you'd like to say, Mr. Brown? He's not here tonight. Okay.
Mr. Brown is not in attendance.
That's
and
right.
Mr. Chairman, we have no one signed up to speak on case 2.
Okay.
So you may close the public hearing.
Close this public hearing at 7:22. Mr. Brown had called me and told me that he couldn't make it today because he was out of town on vacation, and he asked me, would I have to come back Tuesday, because if I do, I will. I said, no, you just enjoy your family. So I told him we'll take care of that. Okay, what's the nature of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of case number R-19021. Mr. Thomas Brown III and Ms. Janet Brown to be rezoned A1 agricultural.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Warren.
Second.
Second by Dr. Miller. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none?
All right, please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to other public hearings.
Yes, sir.
Each person addressing the board under a public hearing shall step up, give his or her name and district and his or her place of residency for non-county citizens in an audible tone of voice for the record. And unless further time is granted by the chairman, shall limit his or her address to 3 minutes. Speakers for a group shall be limited to 10 minutes. Speakers shall conclude their remarks at that time unless the consent of the board is affirmatively given to extend the speaker's allotted time. Absent chairman's approval, no person shall be able to speak who is not signed up. Public hearing, enterprise zone amendments.
Mr. Chairman.
I have to open this.
Yeah, you can now open the public hearing.
Yes, I'm going to. I open this hearing at 7:23. Mr. Matt Rowe.
We're actually going to have Susan McCullough help us out. She's
Okay.
going to see this thing over the goal line.
Oh, good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. We are back today. In June, you asked us to amend the map based on public input in July. So we're here today. The executive committee voted unanimously to approve the amended map as presented, and they asked us to bring it to you. The public hearing has been duly advertised by Mr. Baden Hunt, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And Hargrave has been added to it, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Hargrave Military.
Mr. Chairman, no one has signed up to speak, so it's now appropriate to close the public hearing.
All right, I close this public hearing at 7:24. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the Enterprise Zone Map Resolution 2019-07-01 and incentive amendments as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Warren, seconded by Mr. Barber. Any further discussion?
The issues that were presented previously, they are addressed in the document.
The issue regarding Hargrave Military Academy has been thoroughly addressed.
What about the bank? Was something to do with the old bank building?
That is not in the zone. It wasn't in the zone to begin with.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Number 2, public hearing, EMS billing fee increase. I want to open this public hearing up at 7:25. Mr.
Yes.
Slimp.
Mr. Schlimp is going to introduce it.
Good evening again. This is to allow, well, let me back that up. The EMAC committee recently met, and they are the ones that are charged with setting or recommending the EMS billing rates. Scotty Adams here is the chairman of the EMAC, and after some discussion over a couple months, we reviewed billing rates that we had in the county versus those around us, and we came to a recommendation that, one, we increased the billing rates on the basic life support by $50, advanced life support 1 by $100, advanced life support 2 by $150. We would increase the mileage by $2, and then we would also add something we haven't had in the past that insurance companies, some are now paying for. One of those is a patient refusal, and that would be a $75 fee, and the other one is a treatment with no transport, and that's $400. And that's something like, so I'm a paramedic, I go out and I treat a patient, and this is common. You have somebody with a low blood sugar, and you may give them IVs and drugs, treat them right there, and in 3 or 4 minutes they're back well, and they don't go to the ER. It's a very common occurrence, and it allows the bill for that. We don't do that currently because you do use drugs and supplies. So that would be 2 new things that we would be adding into the fee schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Slimp.
Mr. Chairman, we have one person signed up to speak on this item, and that's Mr. Scotty Adams.
I'm speaking on behalf of Scotty Adams, Callens-Gretna District. Speaking on behalf of the Fire and Rescue Association, as you heard Chris mention, I'm chairman of EMAC. The EMAC committee, we recommended it to the Fire and Rescue Committee, and I'm just echoing. The Fire and Rescue Committee voted to bring it to y'all, so the Fire and Rescue Committee also supports this change also. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
We have no further people signed up, so you may close the public hearing.
I close this public hearing at 7:28. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the EMS billing rates as presented.
Mr. Scarce. Thank you, Dr. Miller. Is there any further discussion?
I guess basically the move to do this is to get in line with what the reimbursement from the insurance companies. That's basically what this is. Okay.
We can only get what the insurance company pays us.
But some of the private carriers would do pay more than like the Medicare does, so that is to do that as well. And I don't believe there's been an adjustment in a couple of years to the billing rates.
Somebody, if you go out, like at Cool Branch or whatever, and you treat somebody on the spot and they don't have insurance, how does that work now?
Right today, they get nothing. There's no bill. Once it's approved, they would get a bill, but there's still no hard bill collection type thing. It's still
No hard bill?
Yes, sir. None of that's changing.
All right.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Mr. Slimp.
Yeah. Yeah, they would get 3 bids, but they're still in the hard collection. They get three bids.
I bring it up just so the public knows what's going on, because this is an important issue. I do point out that on the northern end of the county, because we're not served by volunteer organizations, our people are being hard billed, right?
Shouldn't be. I'll check into that.
Okay.
It's now appropriate for what the board's pleasure is, a motion, second, vote.
What's the pleasure of the board?
We have a motion and a second, so please
Okay.
cast your vote.
Thank you.
Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Number 3, Fire and Rescue Ordinance. Mr. Slimp, I want to open this public hearing up at 7:31 p.m.
Thank you,
Yes, sir.
And as you know, we've done considerable work on the ordinance and had an ad hoc committee working on this. Let me preface this by saying, I appreciate all the work they've done, and it's been several meetings with that. We've had a good moderator as well to help us do this. He's been fantastic to work with. So we put this, some changes about a month ago to this and presented it to y'all. And we wanted to get it back to the ad hoc committee and then back to fire and rescue. So I had a delay trying to get the ad hoc committee together. We had a meeting scheduled, but I had to cancel the meeting because of some funerals, and then we were able to get everybody together finally last Friday. I had majority of the committee there. They looked at the changes. Nobody had any real heartburn with the changes we put in there. We went back and we did make about 6 or 7 just wording changes. And then we had one major change toward the end of it where we talk about the false alarm, billing for false alarms. The sheriff came in and had found, he had gone to a meeting recently and came in and found a better ordinance, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. Had some little better language. So we agreed we would pull that part out altogether, and we'll bring that back at a later date. The sheriff and I are going to work that out and tweak that ordinance as we see fit, and then we'll present that later on. But as a whole, the group agreed to what we had done, changes-wise. I think the consensus of that group was, however, to not act on as far as any voting goes, because we want to get it back in front of fire rescue folks. That's what we've agreed to. That's what we need to do. That's the right thing to do. But during that time, too, there was also some discussion we'd already advertised, so if we had anybody for public comment, allow them to comment on the ordinance. So that's kind of where we are right now. We want to take this back. I've sent it to the counselor to review. He's looked at it briefly, and I've asked him about one other thing, if make sure we don't need to add to it, and doing some research for me. But hopefully within the next day or so, I'm going to send it back out to the whole fire rescue group, and then it'll be given to them also in hand at the association meeting next Wednesday. Would be association meeting? Last Wednesday, excuse me, yeah. 2 weeks. We'll hand it out again. So they'll have a paper copy, but before then, we're going to get it out in an email to all of them as well.
So Chris, your recommendation is to hold a public hearing, seek public input.
Correct.
For the board to take no action and table this matter.
Right.
Bring it back at the next meeting after we have a vote endorsement.
Yes.
Okay, for
But,
action.
you know, if we advertise, we have folks who want to comment, I think we ought to allow that. If they come up here for that, I think that's the right thing to do.
Peyton, we don't need to vote to table it, we just need to take no action.
Yeah, you just
correct?
need to take no action. As long, the changes that's been presented to me are not substantive in nature, except for the fire alarm thing, which you're going to address at a public hearing in the future. Therefore, we can have a public hearing tonight, and then we can act on it in August after we've gotten the endorsement of Chris's organization.
All right.
Since the public hearing is open, if you don't have any further questions, we have one person signed up to speak, and that is, again, Mr. Scotty Adams.
I promise you, last time I'm gonna speak tonight. Scotty Adams, Callens, Gretna District. Mr. Palmer, you're not here, so you can hear me. I asked you to take no action on this tonight. Let it please come back to Fire and Rescue, as all 7 of you promised, that it would go that route before y'all voted on it. Please do that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams.
No one else has signed up.
I'm gonna close this public hearing at 7:35.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes,
If they-
sir,
If they
Mr.
make
Barber.
changes, do we not have to have another public hearing?
Well, that's what staff is gonna determine. Right now, they're just non-substantive wording changes, and if anything rises to the level of substantive change, we would have to have another public hearing. But right now, what's been presented to me have not been substantive in nature. If we get to that threshold, we will have to expend some money and just advertise it for action in August.
I was just wondering, because usually what you advertise is what people come to speak on. I just ain't never seen us do a public hearing and then what we're actually talking about, the document.
Dayton, I think, when you review this, if it's anything close, we need to have another public hearing.
And I will always err on the side of public participation caution. I agree with you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, moving on to item 4, public hearing, building height revision. I would like to open this public hearing at 7:36. Mr. Sides.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This topic has been briefly discussed at a work session of the board before, but in a nutshell, the planning commission was approached by our economic development director indicating that in our heaviest zoning district, particularly in the largest lots, there have been prospects that needed buildings and structures that would exceed the currently allowable maximum height of 80 feet. The only approach other than changing the ordinance is to go through a variance process, which is time-consuming and involves risk to the prospect. So the planning commission recommended an amendment to the zoning ordinance, so it's an amendment to the M2, which is our heavy industrial district. And it would continue that the standard maximum height of the buildings in this district shall be 80 feet. And this is, what I'm reading to you is in your board packet and was also properly advertised. The additional language says, for parcels measuring 150 acres or greater in size, then the maximum height of buildings shall be 150 feet. Buildings greater than 80 feet in height must incorporate on-site fire control provisions. This satisfied all of the interests and concerns of the planning commission, and on July 2nd, we held a public hearing and unanimously approved this amendment. The proper procedure for revising the zoning ordinance is that they then refer it to the Board of Supervisors, which is what we're doing tonight, for you folks to have a public hearing, and then vote on this particular amendment. We have advertised the public hearing, and no one has signed up to speak tonight. So, Mr. Chairman, you may close the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Sides. I close this public hearing at 7:38.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the proposed amendment to section 35-406 of the Pennsylvania County zoning ordinance as presented in the public hearing.
Thank you. Second by Mr. Barber. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, AEP Board Approval of Berry Hill Energy Connection Project. I would like to open this public hearing up at 7:39.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this project relates to the Berry Hill Energy Connection Project. It consists of approximately a 5-mile, 138 kV transmission line and an electrical substation that will be on the property that's currently owned by the Regional Industrial Development Authority. This also relates to a ordinance amendment that you previously made, where the county voted and exempted transmission lines for industrial parks from the special use process. but added language that says, with approval subject to a public hearing and vote by the Board of Supervisors. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're holding a public hearing and it'll be a vote by the Board of Supervisors. The action that was taken on July 2nd by the Planning Commission is a separate requirement that large-scale infrastructure projects such as this have to be voted on by the Planning Commission to verify that the general location and extent of the project is substantially in accordance with your comprehensive plan. And so we did the presentation at the Planning Commission meeting, and they unanimously agreed that the project is in accordance with the comprehensive plan, and that would be ratified by your action tonight. We have representatives from Appalachian Power here tonight, and they would like to give you a little general presentation on the nature of the project, and then we'll entertain questions and speakers from the public.
Thank you. My name is David Swisher. I work for Appalachian Power. I'm an account manager. I cover the Martinsville, Danville, Stewart, Patrick County, Franklin County area, Pennsylvania County. Here tonight to talk to you about the Berry Hill Energy Connection project. Give you a little history on that. Several years ago, we were approached by RIFA. Appalachian Power was approached by RIFA, Pennsylvania County, City of Danville Electric Department, City of Danville, about Appalachian Power providing service to the Berry Hill Industrial Park. At that time, that service territory was in the City of Danville's electric service territory. So we took that under consideration, did a study, and decided that we would serve it if that's what the city and all wanted, and would come back, when they were ready to put together a project that would provide robust power to the industrial park. So the project basically, as Greg talked about, consists of, we actually have a 69 kV line that runs through the park now. But that line does not have the capacity, nor does that line have the reliability that we would need to serve heavy, large industrial customers. So the only way we can really serve this park for the way commercial and industrial customers need to be served is to construct a brand new double circuit 138 kV transmission line. The line basically is going to start west of Brosville to the south of Route 58 and head into the industrial park, stop in the industrial park at a substation. So what we did is basically we started a study segment to determine where is the best place for this line to go. And if you'll look on your presentation on the screen there, all those lines in yellow were places that we considered putting this line. We looked at area in that area, and our main objective was to have minimum impact on landowners, natural resources, but also to meet the main objective of the project, which is to provide a very robust power source to the park. So in doing that, we talked to the county about where the line should go to the city. We looked at maps. We did our own field reconnaissance, going out, looking at the land, seeing where the line would best be gone. We also held a public open house for the public at Brosville Elementary School on January the 9th, 2019. We invited 116 landowners, and they were all affected by this area that you see here. They would have been in that area. 30 showed up. They gave us their comments on what they felt about the land or about the line, and since then we've also met with several landowners individually. So we took the information from that hearing and from everything else that our public open house and from everything else that we've gathered, and we actually came up with 3 alternate routes. And of those 3, you can see A is a little bit more to the east, B is down the middle, and C is the farthest one to the west. After we did our studies, we decided that the one to the west, Route C, would be the preferred route, and we've announced that as our preferred route. Our reasons for that is that it definitely minimizes the overall impact. It affects less property owners. The public in the open house, most of them suggested that type of route. They were in favor of a westerly route. And the construction issues there are fewer. The land flows a little better. It's a little easier to build a power line through that area. So where we're at right now is we've determined a 500-foot corridor. Once we get down to our final engineering, that 500-foot corridor will go to a 100-foot right-of-way. And that's what we would purchase that property from the landowners to put the line on that. This is kind of a picture of just typically what that line would look like. It is a galvanized steel double-circuited poles. They're approximately 100 feet in height. The reason why you have a line on the left side of the pole and a line on the right side of the pole and not just one line is if you were to have a fault on the right side, the line would still stay in on the left side. So therefore, the customers in the industrial park would not be interrupted. That's very important. A lot of the bigger economic development prospects you get, customers, they want to know, is it a double circuit line? Is there an alternate power source? And this would meet all those needs. Once we get to the park, there will be a substation located inside the park. We've actually entered into an option with RIFA to purchase some property in the park to put the substation there. It's approximately 270 feet by 330 and about 50 feet tall, but that will go inside the industrial park. This is where the transformers, the breakers, the protection equipment, and all that will go. From there, we'll go out and build distribution lines to serve the individual customers inside the park. A little bit on our schedule. Back in November, we did our study. We announced the project. And basically, we're now here. We were trying to be in June, but it's actually in July where we're seeking board approval. Once we have that, we will go out and start finalizing our engineering and then acquiring right-of-way later this year and hopefully tie that up by the end of the year or first of next year on acquiring all the right-of-way to construct the line. And as Greg, this slide basically is just what we're here for tonight, to get your approval and from the Planning Commission, your approval of what they passed on to us. And at this time, I would like to entertain any specific questions that you guys have concerning the line. No questions? All right, thank you.
I don't have any questions. I'd just like to say thank you, because this is an important piece of developing that park.
Right.
One of the most important initial steps.
Yes, sir.
And we've been waiting a long time in Pennsylvania County to get this step behind us.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman, we also included some information in your packet that documents that question about compatibility with comprehensive plan. You'll see on our future land use map, there's a very large industrial area shown. That is the Berry Hill Industrial Park and the properties around it. So we were always aware that there would need to be a large-scale electrical project to serve that industrial park. And I'm sure Mr. Rowe could answer any questions if you have any, but it is critical to the industrial park. As far as the public hearing portion, Mr. Chairman, we did have 3 people sign up to speak, and I'm sure the first 2 are together. It's Waverly Cousin Jr. and Barbara M. Cousin.
Mr. Chairman and Board of Directors, we come today to also say we support the Berry Hill project, and we think it's a wonderful thing for our community. We feel good about it and glad it's occurring. The problem that we had initially, and still have some concern, is that we have 3 different AEP lines already running across our property. And as it runs across the property, it basically annihilates what we can use it for. And we're using up a lot of our footage in restricted areas where we can't do certain things. Can't grow trees, we can't develop the property, we can't market it, really can't do anything much with it because of these lines that are on there. So we had an issue with the projected route for the line initially. Now, after talking to the Appalachian officials and those that came down, they did move it, make some arrangement to have it relocated. That helped us out some. And we feel better about that part. The changes sort of helped us out. However, we still feel bad about giving up any additional land that we have that we would like to use to make money off of and to do some other things. Compensation possibly will come, but if it does, in a few years, that basically annihilates whatever we receive, because it's, once the line is there, those restrictions are there forever. And so we sort of dislike that, don't feel too good about it, feel a little bit bad about the fact that we've got to live with this the rest of our lives. And also we have to face these restrictions and guard what we do to try to make money off the property that we have. So that's the point that we have now. Anyone have any questions, we'll try to answer them. You have something you want to say?
One of the things that concerns me at this point is the fact that they have not fully determined where the line is going to go. It could still come back east instead of west, what they've changed it to proposed. And so we're very concerned about all of these items. And if you give them the go-ahead on this project, it means that they can do whatever they want to, east or west. It's nothing guaranteed. And so we ask that you do not vote this into existence tonight.
Yeah, well, the proposal says that they have the option, this is perhaps where it will be, but they'll have the option to, if you, once you vote, on adjusting it however they see is needed. And again, as I said earlier, we're for the Berry Hill project, and we want it to, continue. Don't want that delayed. At the same time, we're still asking them to continue to look and minimize the impact it's going to have on us as much as possible.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. and Ms. Cousin.
Mr. Chairman, we also have David Mentor that signed up to speak.
I'm just wondering, we don't have any objection to the progress of humanity, but looks like for the small community right there where it's gonna cross Oak Hill, right at Hunting Trail, if they just kept straightaways on up to Kyle Road and crossed over, they wouldn't hit West Laco land and be less of an impact on the small community. That's my only concern.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Minner.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that is all of the sign-up folks that we had to speak tonight. You may want Appalachian Power to address more about their process, their minds impact.
Yes, sir, I would. I would like for you, if you would, sir, to address these two concerns.
Sure. We have that last slide on the presentation. Or I have a map I can draw there. Did y'all have this in your presentation? This shows the actual.
Yes, sir.
Just refer to that. That shows how much of the property that we would be affecting of the Cousins. Also, basically, no matter where we build this line, we're going to have to, probably there will be 3 power lines at least on somebody's property.
If you would, speak into the mic, sir. I appreciate it. We need to get this recorded, if you don't mind.
Wherever we start and pull off the line, there's going to be multiple lines on someone's property. You have the 138 line that comes across the property that we're tapping. So that line has to be there because we've got to pull off of that line. You'll have the new line that we are constructing. And then you'll also have the City of Danville 69 line that we have to get over because that line is always to the south of our 138 line that we're tapping. So no matter where we go, we're going to have at least 3 power lines on somebody's property. And then if there's a distribution line that serves their property, that would be the 4th line that there would be. We've moved the property as far over to the western boundary, as you can see on the screen there, as we possibly can. We also are in contact with the people on the next property over. We have a meeting scheduled with them to see if we can get approval to put the line on their property. And if we do, that is where we will move the line. We will move it over to the next property. We do have a 500-foot corridor. That's what we're asking for. We will not go outside that 500-foot corridor with what you guys have approved for. So I don't see us going back to the east in any way whatsoever. We'll be either on the west or over to the next property owner.
So what you're saying is you're not gonna move in on the cousin family anymore, that you got to 500 feet, but right now you're pretty much in the middle of that?
Are we in the middle, Dan, or are we to the left? Are we to the east?
500 foot, I believe, would be, we're down the middle of it, so it'd be 250 feet on either side.
Of the dark black line?
Yes, the solid.
Of the solid dark black line that you
So
see?
what you're saying is you're not gonna move any closer to the area that the property, the acreage that they're concerned about?
Correct. We're not going further to the east. We will either go where we're at or further west.
You'll only improve
Mhm.
their concerns?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask?
Yes, sir.
I asked you similar questions at the planning commission. If you don't put lines on anybody's property unless you have some kind of permanent easement that runs with the land, is that correct?
Correct.
And during this process, you negotiate compensation to the owner for use of their land, is that correct?
Absolutely.
And I assume AEP has lawyers that do this negotiation. Do you allow the citizen to have a lawyer present as well?
Absolutely.
And so you come up with a fair value that they accept and are compensated for taking their land.
Yes.
And in the unlikely event, in the worst case scenario, if you cannot come up with a number, the state has given you the power to condemn someone's land, is that correct? But that's the last case scenario.
That is a last resort. We obviously try to avoid that at all possibility.
So there's no taking of citizens' land without negotiated payment typically.
Absolutely. And that we definitely will negotiate a fair compensation for that property.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, for your information and the board's, the specific state code language that involves the comprehensive plan and was voted by the planning commission and if you support tonight, says that it refers to the general location and extent of a project, recognizing that there's always going to be some variation in the corridor because once their engineering gets refined, then the line gets refined. So you're not approving that the project will be here as opposed to the other side of the tree. It's the general location and route of this project.
Okay.
And also, when you see fit after your discussion, I'll call attention to, there is a resolution in your packet that covers the expectations for tonight.
Do we have anyone else signed up to speak? If not, I'm going to close this public hearing at 7:58. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2019-07-04.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Blackstock, seconded by Mr. Warren. Do we have any further discussion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This is in my area. It's actually down the road from me. I went to the public hearing at Brawlsville School, and I mean, a lot of people come up there and give their input, and I know this is difficult. Nobody wants to go across their land, 'cause two of the routes went across mine. I mean, I didn't care either way, but I've actually had people that was disappointed didn't go across their land because they want to, so you can't please everybody on this stuff. But Mr. Cousins, after talking to this gentleman and listening to this gentleman, I feel like it may not even be on your property. They're either going to go west of you or on the middle of your property. And like I say, it kind of goes back to the thing, everybody likes bacon, but nobody wants pig. It's kind of, we all like power, but nobody wants to be inconvenienced. But I looked at all the routes, all of them had pluses, minuses, and I feel like they've come down with the best solution here that I could see. So I'm gonna support it. I feel like the board's gonna support it because they want to move forward with the project because we actually got a lot of activity going on in Burr Hill. We need to get the power. So, but keep me abrupt if anything comes up and you're not satisfied. I'll be happy to meet also with them.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
That motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 6, public hearing. Sheriff's PC Chapter 11, revisions. I'm going to open this public hearing up at 8 p.m.
Chairman, I asked the sheriff to come up. I'll do the heavy lifting, but he can answer the questions if you have specific questions. What we have are 5 changes that the sheriff has recommended that are authorized by the Virginia Code, that for us to enforce them, we need a local code adopted. These 5 issues were presented to the Legislative Committee at their June 4, 2019 meeting, and they were unanimously recommended for adoption following the public hearings. These items, there are 5. The first one is the sheriff is seeking the board adopt an ordinance that allows for, under Virginia Code Section 15.2, 1716.1, that his office be reimbursed if they have to respond to a terrorism hoax incident, bomb threat, or malicious activation of a fire alarm. So if some knucklehead is doing one of the things I just mentioned and they have to respond to it, and that person is caught and convicted, part of the sentencing order would be able us to recover our expenses in responding to that. That's the first one. The second one is authorized by Virginia Code Section 15.2-1716.2, and it allows the locality, and these costs can be quite significant, when someone is convicted of manufacturing meth and there's a meth house or a meth laboratory that has to be cleaned up because they're extremely volatile, explosive, dangerous. It allows us to recoup those costs during sentencing of the person who manufactured the methamphetamine. The next item is Virginia Code Section 15.2-1717. This allows the sheriff to prosecute someone who's interfering with pupils at schools or on a school bus. We've had instances in the past where we haven't had the ability to arrest individuals that have been, will not leave schools and will not get off a bus, and they're interfering with operations of public schools. The fourth one is allowed by Virginia Code Section 15.2-1717.1, and that allows the sheriff's office, if they're so designated by a private property or business owner, to enforce trespass violations for people who are trespassing on that property. That comes in handy when you have absentee owners or out-of-county business owners or property owners. And finally, the sheriff's asking for an ordinance that mirrors Virginia Code Section 15.2-1719. This outlines the rules and procedure that the sheriff can sell, auction, give away unclaimed property that's been in his possession for over a certain amount of time. So the sheriff is here to answer any specific questions. The exact language for the code sections start on your packet on 499. We have advertised all these things properly. This was unanimously recommended by the Legislative Committee. Sheriff Taylor can put any meat on the bones of what I just said or answer any questions that you have. But we ask for the board to open the public hearing. No one has signed up for this, and then take the action outlined in your packet.
All right, thank you. You don't have any comments?
No, sir, no questions.
Okay. I'm going to close this public hearing at 8:04 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the Sheriff's Chapter 11 revisions as presented.
Second.
Mr. Blackstock made the move. Thank you. And Mr. Barber seconded. Any further discussion?
Just one comment. I don't want to sound political, you're running unopposed. And I think this is a reason why. You're being proactive instead of reactive with this. Just like going after those people that are making meth. I happen to know that it's extremely costly and dangerous to clean up that mess. And we certainly appreciate the efforts, Sheriff, of you and your agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none?
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to number 7, public hearing. Lack of control of companion animal. I open this public hearing up at 8:05. Mr. J. Vaden Hunt, Esquire.
Mr. Chairman, and members of the public, if you think we're going fast, we are, but that's because this item has been before the board at least 4 times before in various legislative committees and work sessions. Tonight, we have a public hearing for lack of control of companion animal to be added to the Pennsylvania Code as section 2-26. This item was unanimously recommended by the legislative committee. It has been tacitly endorsed by the agricultural community as it only applies to companion animals, which are defined as dog, cats, or canine crossbreeds. It does not apply to any livestock or other type of agricultural animals, nor does it apply to hunting or public safety dogs or law enforcement search and rescue activity or field trials. So this would basically allow animal control and the citizens of this community to have an additional tool in their toolbox where they can seek the magistrate to swear out a summons and have their day in court for a companion animal that's trespassing upon their property in a manner to damage property, habitually running at a large and restricted area, meaning 3 or more convictions within 2 years, molesting, annoying, or intimidating passengers or pedestrians not located on the companion animal's property, defecating without permission on the property owner when they do not remove it, or being found at large on school property. These things allow people to have to take control of their companion animals without it rising to the level of a bite or an attack, which we could prosecute them for vicious or dangerous dogs. I'm happy to answer any further questions. No one has signed up to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Counselor. I'm going to close this public hearing at 8:07. What's the nature of the board?
Well, I had a call today concerning one of these matters. There was a lady who's very upset about her neighbor not controlling their companion animal. So I'll make a motion that we adopt the ordinance as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Blackstock, seconded by Mr. Warren. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
I just want to echo Mr. Hunt. This has been a very long process, but I think it's long overdue for the county. You know, as a county our size, there's different areas, and obviously different areas may sometimes require different rules or ordinances that can kind of umbrella the whole county as a whole for our animal control officer. So just want to say thank you to the fellow board members and all the committee members that had a part in this. And also, like Mr. Hunt mentioned, you know, other people outside of the of our offices, even different citizens have had input. So again, I'm pretty proud of finally being able to get this voted on tonight, and it's something I'm definitely going to support.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Any further conversation? Any statements? Any points? Thank you. Hearing none?
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item 11.
Your Honor, Mr. Chairman, we do not have any unfinished business, so we can move to 12, new business.
Yes, sir. Brownsville 622 Convenience Center Site Construction Bid Award. Mr. Richard N. Hicks.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, with the adoption of last year's budget, we proposed the construction of 3 additional convenience centers or compactor sites. We are in the process, and I think have pretty much finalized the purchase of those 3 lots. And we wanted to move forward on the actual design and construction of those sites. A second objective of last year's budget was to take a single convenience center that was not very customer friendly. It was difficult to get in and out. We got issues with the Broswell 622 site. We got asphalt that needs to be replaced. So our engineers designed a plan for that site that would allow vehicle traffic to come in, circle around, and utilize all the services. And as it stands now, people pull in, they're trying to back up to miss the person that came in behind them. It's just a very confusing site. We advertised for bids. The lowest bid price for the revisions to that site was by Cruz Construction, and that total price to include fixing the asphalt at the entranceway of the site is $95,000. We spent sometime this evening with the finance committee, and we gave them an update on what our future capital funds might be available. And I think there was some questions as to which sites could be done. What we'd like to ask you is instead of taking action this evening, is that you delay action until the August meeting, and we'll give you more detailed cost estimates on the 3 sites that we want to build, and we'll have some additional information there. There are some other sites, that are problem areas that need additional modifications. So in 10, if the board approves, we'll bring you additional information at the August meeting, and we'll ask you to award this bid at the August meeting. And I'll try and answer any questions that anybody might have. Is there a deadline to issue the bid? What's the deadline to accept? The bids are normally good for 30 to 60 days. We'll, to verify that Monday, but I suspect they'll let us go another month. They're not going to want to give up that bid.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
We'll just take no action.
Or do we? Okay, because I thought we were going to vote to table till next month.
We can do either way.
Well, okay. Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Moving on to item B, Wayside Park Grant Agreement Approval. Mr. Mark Moore.
Good evening, board members. You have in front of you 2 grant agreements, one from the Danville Regional Foundation in the amount of $306,540, and one from JT Mini Mall Charitable Trust in the amount of $100,000. These 2 grants wrap up the funding phase of the Wayside Park renovations. The funding phase included a grant we brought to you last month from the Virginia Outdoors Foundation. There's a game time playground equipment grant that we'll be getting as well. The only requirement of the county is to fund $150,000 of the project, which $75,000 is in this year's fiscal year's budget. Next year's budget would have to include that same amount over 2 years. So these 2 grants from Danville Regional Foundation and JT Mini Mall would be paid out in equal amounts over the next 2 years. So those 2 grants are the ones that are before you. I want to take an opportunity real quick before we finalize it to note this project, if the grants are approved tonight, will $713,000 project, $563,000 of it will be paid for in local grant funding. That is close to $60,000 more in grant funding than the middle school park project is. And so we are putting the equivalent funding into the Wayside Park, which desperately needs it, the equivalent amount of funding that we put into the middle school park project. So these are two projects that we have, capital projects that we've gotten done in recreation over the last 8 years with north of $500,000 in grant funding. So our local grant partners have been more than generous in helping to fund recreation over my 8 years here. And with this project, we're just south of $1.3 million in recreation grant funding over the last 8 years. So again, Danville Regional Foundation, JT Mini-Malt, Community Foundation, to name a few, Centra, SOVA. We've had a lot of funding partners, Revitalization for Greater Gretna. We've had a lot of big and small funding partners in the recreation game over the last 8 years. And so we've been more than blessed in the funding that we've received from our partners. And I'm more than thankful to them and to the board for the support of recreation over the last 8 years. So having said all that, what's before you is a little over $406,000 in grant funding.
Mr. Chairman, I may make a motion to accept both the Danville Regional Foundation and JT Mini-Malt Charitable Trust grant agreement and allow the county administrator to sign these documents on behalf of the county.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Blackstock, second by Mr. Warren. Thank you. Thank you for the outstanding job you've done, Mr. Moore, as well as the foundations who've supported us in our plight. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your support.
Okay, we had a motion made by Mr. Blackstock, seconded by Mr. Warren. Is there any further discussion by anyone?
I'd just like to make a brief comment. I would like to say thank you to all the parties that were involved. Mark, you included, for your work. When I originally ran for the Board of Supervisors many years ago, this was on my agenda. I grew up in this community. I watched it. This park was a vital part of our lives in northern Pennsylvania County, and it grew in disrepair to where it became a haven for drug use and illegal behavior. And at one point, a lot of us thought we probably should seek just ways to keep the gate closed and let nothing occur there. And so I'm very excited about the grant money and the renovations to the park. I know our community is. This also plays a vital part in economic development because this backs up to the Stanton River properties that we're over there marketing. So it's kind of a bundle. And with the new bridge coming in from Alta Vista into the town of Hurt, down, it's not Main Street, but the main, well, it is Main Street, the main drag there. This will be quite an improvement to our community there. And so I want to say thank you to everyone involved. Like Mr. Warren, we're not always in agreement on a lot of issues, but he reached out and helped with this project too. And I'd say thank you to you specifically, Mr. Warren.
Thank you.
Mr. David, thank you, Mr. Blackstock, for the comments. I would echo the same comments that Mr. Blackstock said, and I want to thank, I noticed that Mr. Barksdale is in attendance tonight. He's a member of the Danville Regional Foundation, so on behalf of us and myself, thank you, Mr. Barksdale, for your support over there on this project and for the good work you all do a lot. And I would be remiss if I didn't recognize JT Mini-Malt and my childhood friend Fred Webb for really taking a heavy involvement in trying to promote this project, and I think it'll do really good things for the northern end of the county, but not only for the northern end of the county, for the entire county. And Mr. Moore is to be commended for the middle school parks, and for this, it's unbelievable to have that kind of outside participation with your local government to get these projects done. You do a lot of other good things, but in particular those projects. Thank you very much. Job well done.
We have a motion by Mr. Blackstock and a second by Mr. Warren. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none?
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Vote carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 13, appointments. No, pardon me, we have Ms. Kimberly Vanderhyde, WIA year-end grant appropriations. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight I have an item for your consideration for the WIA year-end grant appropriations, and this is probably the first of many that you will see in the next few months. During the budget process, the Workforce Investment Board estimates the amount of grants that they'll receive for the upcoming budget year. Many of these grants are not on our regular fiscal year budget, but they go over and they may end at various times during the year. And as such, sometimes these estimates are not accurate or need to be approved for additional appropriation at year end. So I have reviewed all of the WIA accounts for year end, and it was found that 3 departments do require additional funding, and they total $568,082.65. Therefore, the Youth Out of School Program, the Youth In School Program, and the Pathways 2019 grant. And just as a reminder, Pittsylvania County does serve as the WIA fiscal agent, and as such, there are no local monies involved in these grants. So staff would recommend that you all approve the grant appropriations as outlined in your board packet, totaling $568,082.65. And like I said earlier, they do not require a local match.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Vanderhyde? What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to appropriate a total of $568,082.65 to the WIA fund as outlined in the board packet.
Thank you, Mr. Blackstock. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Scarce. Do we have any further discussion?
It's nice, there's no local money involved. Still taxpayer money, though.
Thank you. No further discussion? Hearing none?
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Item 13, appointments. Do we have any appointments?
We do not.
Okay, item 14, matters from the work session. Strategic plan approval. Mr. Smitherman.
Yes, sir. As a result of our conversation this afternoon at the work session, the board has presented its strategic plan that it worked on over the course of calendar year 2018. This item was tabled back in the early part of 2019 and is brought back today in our new fiscal year for adoption. The board at its work session recommended 2 revisions to the document. One was in section 4B that makes implementation of section 4B in 2020, and the second is to require that any implementation items that require appropriation be brought to the board for approval. And I believe that Mr. Warren has some motion with those modifications.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the strategical plan with the following changes. Section 14A, to approve the Pittsylvania County Board of Supervisors strategical plan with the following changes. Revise section 4B to make the potential implementation thereof the year 2020, and add a statement to the strategical plan requiring county staff to bring any action items contained in the strategical plan involving an appropriation to the Board of Supervisors for approval before implementation.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Scarce. Thank you. Is there any further comments or discussion?
I'd just like to say, we had a lively discussion today concerning the strategic plan in a work session, and I appreciate the amendments that were ultimately approved, will be approved tonight.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none.
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
That motion carries unanimously for that amendment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Blackstock. Moving on to item 15. Is that correct? I thought we were missing
We
something.
have 14B, discussion of performance of board appointee to the Pennsylvania County Service Authority.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to get into a discussion first, or should I go ahead and make my motion? And then
Before you have discussion, you need a motion and a second on the floor.
All right, well, my motion, some information has come to light in the last month to me on the appointee that I have on the Westover District position on the Service Authority, and I feel the event was so egregious, had I known about it in February, I would not have appointed this individual, so at this point, I'm making the motion to remove him from the Service Authority.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Scarce and a second by Mr. Warren. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer a substitute motion.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a substitute motion that, in light of the discussion earlier in our closed session, that the appointee from the Westover District to the Pennsylvania County Service Authority be suspended for a term of 3 months.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Blackstock and a second by Mr. Barber.
So Mr. Blackstock's amended motion must be disposed of first.
All right.
It's now right for any discussion.
Okay. We have any further discussion?
Just for clarity sakes, a no vote would mean we go back to the first vote, the first motion.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Any further discussion? We have a motion by Mr. Scarce and a seconded by Mr. Warren.
No.
No.
We have amended motion. We have a
Amended
motion
motion.
by Mr. Blackstock.
Pardon me. Okay, I'm on the first one.
That's
I'm
what
just-
I'm going to put up now. So that
The
would be.
amended motion.
Yes.
Thank you.
So if you vote no to this, you're disagreeing with Mr. Blackstock's suggestion to suspend the Westover appointee for a 3-month period. And if this motion passes, that's the action of the board. If it fails, we go back to the original motion by Mr. Warren.
So we have a motion by Mr. Blackstock and a second by Mr. Barber. Further discussion? Hearing none?
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
Yes.
All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
The motion and the second fails. The no votes are 4, 3 yes.
So now we go to the original motion, and Mr. Warren, can you repeat that motion, please?
Mr. Scarce.
Mr. Scarce, can you repeat that motion, please?
Yes, I make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to remove my appointee to the Service Authority.
I have a motion by Mr. Scarce to remove the appointee. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Warren. Do we have any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just find it hard to believe that this particular individual served over 36 years on the Service Authority, and I think we all agree that he made a mistake. He's offered an apology, and I just don't feel like that this rises to the level of dismissal. This individual was served with a great honor and distinction on this board, as well as many other boards in the county for numerous years. Tonight, he was involved, I know specifically, with the Berry Hill project, and we're getting ready to see fruits of that labor affect this county for generations to come. And we all make mistakes. I know he's struggling with some personal health issues, and I have a real problem with dismissing this individual based on a few minutes of just a mistake. And he's offered an apology.
Thank you, Mr. Blackstock. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to also say, I've known Mr. Harville 16 years. I met him 16 years ago, and I just think about the good that he has done for the county, the things he's done, things I've learned from him. And like I said, I'm like Mr. Blackstock. I hate a mistake to rise to that level. I feel like suspension is a better avenue, but that's my thought.
Thank you, Mr. Barber.
Mr. Chairman, I only have one thing to say. Tonight, Mr. Harville came in here with hat in hand and apologized publicly for the first time. When we approached him last week on this issue, he said he did nothing wrong and he was going to fight this issue. As soon as I saw the video in question that was brought to my attention a month ago, the first thing I did was go apologize to the business owner for the county, because what you did was so bad. I've been fighting to get rid of the good old boy system that I heard all about when I got appointed to this board. And this is just a step backwards. If we allow this to go on, to still go on, we should be accountable to our citizens, and nothing like this should ever happen. I had to go through the same issue last year with DSS. Nobody wanted to support getting rid of a person that was doing the same good old boy bully stuff, and I'm not going to put up with it, with the appointee that had I known about it in February, he would not be sitting on the board now. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I was in receipt of it in June 3rd, as I indicated to the board tonight. It was very disappointing. I do appreciate the years of service that Mr. Harville's had. I've recognized him on many occasions when I was chairman for that work, and particularly when we were doing economic development projects. But as a person that is running to serve again, I just have deep concerns about it could happen again, and I can't support it. Sorry.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right, we have a motion by Mr. Scarce and a second by Mr. Warren. Hearing no further discussion,
Please cast your vote. Mr. Farmer, can I get your vote verbally?
No.
Thank you. All votes have been cast. I will now close the vote.
thank you. 4 yes and 3 no. Moving on to board member reports. Mr. Barber.
I have none.
Mr. Blackstock.
Just like to report that the rodeo conducted in the Grit community was a success. Community seemed very excited about it. This board had a role to play in that over the last 2 or 3 years of making sure that the appropriate plans were in place, and Mr. Lanier and his wife put on an excellent show, and I did not receive one complaint from the community about the rodeo. So it was nice to have some local entertainment, and I didn't have to drive all the way out to Vista. I could stop in Grit.
Thank you, Mr. Blackstock. Dr. Miller?
I have no specific comments tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Scarce?
As we were briefed earlier today, and I want to give a shout out to our Pet Center director and his team. We were informed that in the last 6 months, he's come under budget almost, I think it was well over $95,000. And the amount of money he's been able to find in grants and the support from the community has increased substantially. So I'd like to give a shout out to James McLaughlin and thank him for his hard work And he's doing a great job, and I want to thank the county staff in selecting him and allowing him to work for us. He's doing a great job, David.
Thank you, Mr. Scarce. Mr. Warren?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
I have nothing. Mr. County Administrator?
I also want to publicly thank Mr. McLaughlin and the entire team at the Pet Center. There have been a lot of changes in the last 6 months. We came in $100,000 almost under budget for the last 6 months and raised almost an equal amount in contributions to our efforts. We couldn't be more proud. There's a big event coming up in August, WAGFest, in conjunction with the Old Dominion Agriculture Foundation, and we look forward to great support for that. And we also are now, we have adoption of our animals in the PetSmart in Danville, and just hope that people recognize that there are many animals looking for good homes, and we hope that you will take advantage of what the Pet Center has to offer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smitham. Counselor?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I want to declare this meeting adjourned.